Hey, I'm there, and welcome to episode 8 of my Advanced Modeling tutorial series. This episode will be more about GUIs actually. There are a few things I'd like to address. And first of all, I'd like to make a correction to what I said on last week, but I'll go into that in a second. Then I'd like to discuss with you GUI syncing, and that's from server to the client and from client to the server. There are a few things we can clarify about that. I've discussed syncing with clients and servers already, but it's a little bit different here, so I'd like to show that. And I'd also like to show you how to do buttons in GUIs. And maybe I'll show you how to do text fields as well, so where you can put in text, basically. So let's dive into it. So first of all, correction. Last episode I told you that this method, onBlock activated in the block class, will only be called when the player is not pressing shift on the server side. That isn't exactly the case. It kinda is, but it kinda is not. And we can prove that by looking at, I think it's this one. Almost. I think it's this one. Yeah, it's. So I've looked at the call hierarchy where this method is being called. And if you look at this, point here, you'll say it says the player, if the player is not sneaking, or the currently held item equals null, meaning the player doesn't hold any item. When either of those are true, then the block will be used. Either that, or when the item that's being held bypasses sneaking. And I'm not sure in vanilla where that's being done, but if you look at that method, the default implementation, and actually for almost every item this is false. This won't be overridden and this will return false. So we can't really use this. However, this is interesting. So I was partly right. When the player is not sneaking, it will allow this method to be called. Or when the item is null. So we could use that. We could still implement it by checking if the player is sneaking or not. And do it that way. And I think I'm going to do that real quick. Which is basically just part of doing this. Shall we do shift clicking equals opening the GUI? So we can do player, if player is sneaking, open the GUI, and else do that thing we used to do at the beginning. So let's see if that works actually. Okay, so if we right click, our old functionality works. And if we shift right click, with an empty hand that is, it will do this. Nice. Haha. So if we shift right click, we can just access the GUI. Nice. Now one thing I'd like to add in this, just to show you how it's done, is add a little text here that displays how long the fuse is until this bomb gets armed. And because that's in a GUI, that's on the client, but that value is on the server, so we'll need to sync it. And you could do this with description packets, like we've seen with doing this in here. However, that's really not efficient, because only players that have the GUI open needs this value to be synchronized. So that's where a handy feature in the container comes in. And we'll look at that right now. Container camel mine. And if we look, for example, at the enchantment table, we'll see a detect and send changes and a update progress bar. The enchantment table has done it a little bit inefficiently. So let me just explain. Detect and send changes is a method that's being called just on the server side. And it's called every tick. And it goes through all crafters, and every player is a crafter. So basically it goes through the players that have this GUI open. And for every player it sends a integer value, this integer value basically, with this ID to the client, that is. And the ID basically gives us information about which value you're actually going to send. So now it says the first enchantment level, and the second enchantment level, and the third enchantment level. And on the client side, we of course need to know which levels got sent. So on the client side, as soon as you call this method, a packet will be sent to the client, and eventually it will go through this method. And this is the ID, and this is the value. So it checks if the value is, if the ID is between, well, IDs that make sense, between between 0 and 2. Then just make the enchantment level equal to the value that's being sent. So that's basically it, but we can make that more efficient by checking if the value actually has changed since last tick, and if so, then send it. So we could do that here. We can keep track of a last value, so we can do private int last fuse, and this timer, we are going to access this timer. So while we're at it, let's create a getter for it, and also a setter, because on the client side we are going to set it. There you go. So let's just call it last timer. And I usually make this one -1. Basically, I'm forcing, as soon as the player opens a container, this value will be at -1, and therefore it will always be different from what the current value is. So it will force a packet to be sent, basically. Unless, of course, you have a value which can go, well, which coincidentally could be -1. But yeah. Also take a note that although you would think that integer values are being sent, internally those are being kept at shorts, as far as I know. So you can have values between -32,000 and 32,000. And I've had an instance in Metagraph where a value overflowed, a energy value, a flex compressor, I believe, which got beyond 32,000 RF, and then it flipped and it looked at -32,000 RF, even though that was just an syncing issue. So keep that in mind when you are dealing with big values, that you are going to have problems here. And to resolve that, to send anything other than integers, I don't think there's a vanilla method of doing it. I would recommend doing almost the same, but just not using this send progress update and detect and send changes, but instead send your custom packet containing the info and receiving the packets, and maybe reroute it through here. I've been highlighting the wrong method. I meant this one and this one. Oh well. So let's do this. We can stick them in here, and we can take this one. And I might sound a little bit nasal, and that's because I'm having a cold. I hope that doesn't distract you that much. Okay. So we can do like if the last timer is not the same as the current timer, so this is on the server. When on the server the timer has changed, that means we're going to need to sync up the values, and you can cast these. Your list. Am I derp? Be right back. Oh, oops, I just forgot to import list. And that's it. Okay, crafter send progress bar update. From which container? This container. Which ID? Just use ID 0 and do timer. And when we've done that, we need to make sure that equals t get timer. So we are updating the value. Oh, we made it final. Thank you, formatter. We just make sure that we make it equal to the updated value. So next time this will be false, provided that this timer hasn't changed. So it won't unnecessarily update the client. Okay, update progress bar, and then we can do if ID equals 0. T Z set timer to the value. We shouldn't really need to check it, but it's, well, there's room for expansion basically. Another thing you could do is do a switch case here and do the same here, but that isn't necessary. You could do that on your own. And actually in Pneumaticraft I've got a neat system built on a annotation, so a thing like this one, which is used to sync up keys. But that's a little bit too in-depth to show in here. This might be nice for beginners. And I think most other mods are using this system as well. So. Okay, so we've got these keys or these values synchronized now. We couldn't use it already, so let's add it in the GUI. We can make a field here because we're going to need to access this talented T. And then in here I can do a super, and we can also do a font render draw string, and let's use a language key for this. So let's see what we've got already. Categories. Let's do a GUI that advanced mod dot CamoMine.timer. So what I'm going to do here is using a language which contains some formatting. So you've got this key, and this value, %s, will be replaced by a variable. So we can do it right here. And we can place this language key in here. We can do i18n format, and usually you can just do it like this, but now we're going to add a key into this, so we can do a get timer. Because if we look, we'll see you can do the translation key and the parameters. So that's basically the same as string.format, like that, but integrated in the localization system. So the X and the Y position, we can do a GUI left plus 10, so make just right of the left side edge. GUI top plus, let's do 30. This is just guessing, and we might need to adjust it. And now the color, let's make it black. 1 0 short, I think, or 2 zeros too much, too many. Yeah, let's do it like that. I've discussed colors already when we did a Did I discuss colors already? I probably did in the... I should have. Let's think about that. I don't think I did actually. So this last parameter in the drawString method is the color of the string. Let's just start up Minecraft in the meantime. So the color is formatted as a hex color format. So if we go like this, we can do so it's like this. It's always 0x, which is telling Java that a hex value will be parsed into here. And the first two numbers, which you can make a value from 0 through 255 out of. The first two you can select the alpha value, so how transparent the text is. If you make it 0, it's completely transparent. When you make it double F, meaning 255, it's not transparent at all. And next two values are the R value, the green values, and the blue value. So you might recognize that from a imaging program. If we go to GIMP, there should be one as well, and you can use a program like GIMP to select a color you'd like to have. There you go, HTML notation. It's dark red. You can just copy paste it and it will work perfectly fine in here. You just need to remember that GIMP doesn't use alpha values, so there are no alpha values in front of here. So I'm using double F, meaning not transparent at all, completely opaque, and 6 times 0, meaning no red, no green, no blue, meaning black. And okie doke. Oh, we just need a CamoMine. Ah. And if we look in the GUI, we'll see the let's disable sound. Stupid flags. We'll see the key even though it shouldn't be there. And I probably haven't updated the language file. That's a little bit better. So if we place down a camel mine, we should see... Oh, there we go. That's not completely right though. This is the value in ticks. But you do see ticking it down, meaning that the value is being synced. See? So let's move it a bit. Let's move it to the left. I think you shouldn't do it with GUI left. Yeah, okay. I think the foreground layer already shifts the entire rendering by GUI left and GUI top. So you need to put in your values basically in relation to that. Oh, there we go. This is more like I'd like to. I wanted to have that. We can change that value for next time to text. Will that fit, you think? I think it will be fitting. Now it will be fitting for sure. And I can show you that the color will change. We can make it completely red. There we go. Or we can make it the same color as being used in here. Or not. Oh, that's one value. Oh, that's not even a hex value. Like this, okay. But to keep it as an example, I'd like to put it like this. Maybe do. It's not really grey, is it? That's a little bit too grey. Okay. I like this color. Nice. And when we reset the instance or reload the instance, then this text will update as well. This second text. So, what if we'd like to allow the timer to be reset when we press a button, for example? That's a nice exercise to show you how to do buttons and also how to sync from the client to the server in a GUI context. Because we press the button on the client, but the server needs to know. So let's do that. So adding buttons actually is pretty simple. If we just close the GUI or close the instance, what you can do is in this method do a super init GUI. And you'll see not much is being done, but this is where you need to define your buttons. You shouldn't do it in the constructor, because buttons, when you have your GUI open and you do something like going full screen, that will screw up the button locations basically. So it's important to do it right in here, because that method is also being called when you change your screen size, for example. So we can do a GUI button, and GUI buttons are just a class, so you can make an instance out of that. And like with always, I'm not pulling this from nothing. You could look at how Minecraft is doing it, where are buttons being used. You can just do GUI button and do a call hierarchy, and you'll see what would be a nice one. There you go, you'll see this. And this action performed, we're also going to use that. And basically you only need to know very few things. I'll explain this one in a second. But for now, a GUI button. So making a new button is equals new GUI button. And you need to give it a button ID. So when you've got multiple buttons, you can, well, distinguish them. Let's just make it a 0, and the X position of the button, it will be a little bit below the text. And you know, a text is, well, we make it at the same X as the text, but I think you have to do it with GUI left this time. And GUI top plus a little bit below it, so 25, but that's the start. It's 10 pixels high, so I think 37 maybe. And now the width of the button, let's make it 40 pixels wide, and you always want to have the button to be 20 pixels high, because else it will look weird. I'll show you that maybe later, or maybe in a second. But we can do GUI advanced mod camo mine.button reset. And let's add that key. And also do a I18 and format. So you see, every string I'm presenting to the user is going through format localization step. And by the way, the return value of this formatting will be the text that's displayed on the button. So you can see those are all the parameters, and the display string or the text on the button, that's this last parameter, this one. Equals reset and let's also make one in advance. So remember that one I added, but that one will come later. And now we just need to add it to a list, so we can do a button list as button. There we go. You could make it a one-liner, just could you do this, for example? But we'll leave it like this for clarification. And when that button is being pressed, you want to do something, so you can do that in here. This method is being called as soon as a button is being pressed, and you can do actions in here. We'll do that later. Let's for now just show you what will happen. But adding a button is not a big deal, is it? This is all you need to do, and this just handles the button action. there you go. And if you were to turn on the volume, you'll hear the button click. Oh, and by the way, I told you about buttons. When you didn't make them 20, it will look weird. If I do 15, for example, and reopen the GUI, it looks like that. So yeah. Not even sure what higher values will do. That looks weird as well. Okay, so 20 is the one you want. And also you will have to modify or create your own button to make it work. Now with this reset we are going to stop the camel mine. And the stopping of the camel mine will be done on the server. So in this method we want to send a packet to the server. So a clean way of doing this is using a custom packet, which is exactly what we're going to do. And there isn't a built-in way, as far as I know, a neat built-in way to do it using using vanilla only. I think there's something in the enchantment table, a method called enchant items or something, but that's just a name that can be a bit confusing and it isn't really versatile. So that's why I usually use a custom packet like this. And as I've discussed syncing and a custom packet handler already, I've just made this packet and I've registered it in here, and I also completed all these the forwarding of sending packets, even though we're not going to use it right now, but just as a heads up. So I've given it a new ID and I registered and on the server to be received. Now it isn't done yet. We still need to handle it. I started on it already, so we're getting the taunt T which got sent, and we could add it in constructor already. So first of all we need an empty constructor, and second we can add one taunt T advanced mod. And we can also do a ID and a value. So when we're going to send this packet from the client, we're adding the X, Y, and Z coordinates. So at the receiving side we can get a taunt T out of that. And then we are also going to overload these values. There you go. So those will be sent as well. And this ID value system, it's pretty much similar to how it's done in here. So an ID and value which got sent. So when different buttons are being pressed, different IDs will be sent, and this value you could use if you, well, you could, actually we could just get rid of the value. I mean, if you are receiving the packet, you know a button is pressed. You could add it if you want. That's what I was meaning with being versatile. And I might even make it into a string later for the text field. Let's do that. Or well, we could make a separate packet for that. Okay, and now we can do we can change this to advanced mod, and we can add a public void on GUI button press. Okay, and the button ID make it empty by default. So we can call this method as soon as we receive a packet and just let the entity do whatever it wants to do. So this is really generic. You don't want to handle like the resetting of a camel mine in here. You just want to check if the entity is an instance of entity advanced mod. And that's another Eclipse feature, this, just to auto-complete it after you've did a successful instance of check. Okay, that should be it. I've registered the packet already. We just need to send that. Let's also go to the camel mine class and do this. When the button is pressed, we can do if ID is 0, then set the timer to 60. And so as soon as on the server a packet is being received saying that the button with ID 0 is pressed, then we are resetting the timer. So on the client we still need to send that packet when that button is being pressed. So we can do a those checks for which ID is pressed are not really necessary, but it's clean because this way you're being prepared when you decide to add another button to the camel mine, for example. So you can do a network send to server new message handle GUI button press, and we just need to give it the entity and the ID. Okay. If that works, when we press the button in the GUI, we should see this being reset. And it does not. Let's check what's wrong here. And I think the issue was that the hotcodes replacer didn't replace it correctly. So it didn't notice that I overwrote this method while we were starting up Minecraft. So let's try it again. There we go. Awesome. So let's to prove it works, can reset it and run past it. This concludes part 1 of the more about GUIs episode. I'll come back in part 2 where we'll be finishing up the button explanation. I'll be implementing a proper resetting. And I'll also show you how to do text fields and the syncing that's being used in there. So, see you all next episode, and bye bye.